Oh, and good evening, baseball fans. This is the Bicoastal Baseball Podcast on the Grid Network, the only exclusive baseball podcast on the Grid Network. I'm Mike Guido. That's Dalton Brown. And we are prepared to maybe have our busiest show of the year right now. We have plenty of stuff to go over today. But when I say plenty of stuff, I mean plenty of stuff. Um, Dalton, how you feeling, my friend? Repping a different hat today.
Yeah, so I'm guessing you don't quite recognize this one, which is understandable. This is the AAA affiliate of the Cincinnati Reds, our hometown Louisville Bats here in town. Their games are a ton of fun. Just on a whim, decided I'd represent the Bats tonight. So here we go.
See, there we go. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. See, I always find it that the minor league teams seem to have much cooler, like uniform flair than some of the major league clubs. They tend to have a little bit more fun with things. So I can appreciate that. So plenty of stuff to hit on today. Obviously, the big story is we are now seeing a mass implementation of Negro League statistics entering into the major league database. That's a big story, changing a lot of the record books. We'll touch on that. That's a big debate piece. So make sure you stick around for that. Ronald Acuna, one of the biggest stars in our sport, is out for the season. The Braves, how does that impact them? Will they make a move to try to recover from that? Is it even that big of a deal given how Ronald Acuna's year was going to date? We'll touch on that as well. The infamous, shall I say, Angel Hernandez has retired from Major League Baseball. I think there are a lot of baseball fans that might be feeling a bit of, they might be able to rejoice in that a little bit. We'll touch on that briefly a little bit later as well. Listen, I think it is more than fair as a Yankee fan to consider Luis Gil as one of the Cy Young candidates. We'll touch on that a little bit later as well. Plus, end of the show today. Dalton's Hot Corner, help put some money in your pocket. I told you, we are absolutely jam-packed. But first, as we start in every single show, we cater to our own fan bases. Sorry, not sorry. Yankees, Dodgers, here we go. Okay, for my Yankees rant today, here's the thing. I'm getting to a point now where I am like I'm 100% bought in. Like, this is a very good baseball team, and I don't think that it's like I don't think you can deny that. I don't think you can say this is a fluke. This is a really good baseball team. Aaron Judge has been the hottest hitter in baseball for the last month. You know, Juan Soto is still playing great. Anthony Volpe's playing great. I mean, you have guys who are ranking pretty high up there in the majors. They're well above average in WRC plus and all that stuff. Pretty much across their lineup. That's a really big deal for me. Here's obviously the big record that everybody's talking about, and it's a little bit of a funky stat, but I do think it's kind of interesting. Without Garrett Cole to this point, the Yankees starters have gone 15 straight games, throwing at least 5 innings and allowing fewer than 2 runs. Again, in their last 15 starts, that's the longest streak since 1893. I don't know that it's ever been done. So, and again, that's without Garrett Cole. The Yankee rotation is a 1.96 ERA in the month of May. Luis Gil right now, again, we're going to touch on him a little bit later. Luis Gil with a 2.11 ERA. Clark Schmidt with a 2.52. Carlos Rodon with a 2.95. Marcus Stroman with a 2.76. Nestor Cortez with a 3.3. I mean, the rotation has very clearly been there. I do have 2 issues, and I think the first one I'll address is, and I touched on this a little bit briefly, I do think at some point the main area of concern that they're going to need to address is the back end of the bullpen, right? As good as it's been, there are times where you really need to get quality outs without contact, and they just simply can't do that, right? This is not a bullpen that is built for high strikeout rates. That, listen, as good as guys like Luke Weaver have been, as good as guys as Victor Gonzalez has been, Clay Holmes obviously has been very good. His last 2 outings or so have been a little rough, but for the most part, he's been excellent. You still need to find guys with high strikeout stuff and get big outs in late in games where you need legitimate strikeouts if you're in a pinch. That's, I think, something they'll have to address. The other thing is, I don't know if this is going to become a conversation later or sooner rather than later, but the Yankees may need to start having a little bit of a conversation about Anthony Rizzo. Like, I think he's getting to a point where his offensive production is fairly subpar, and his defensive production has actually this year, compared to how it's been in years past, has been very, very subpar. He's negative in virtually every defensive metric. Like, it's getting to a point where it's relatively concerning. So a couple of minor concerns, but overall I'm feeling okay today, Dalton Brown, about my hometown New York Yankees.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, from one week to the next with them, they've been kind of the same team all year, which is a nice thing, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you touched on it. Something we've touched on almost every show, the idea of how well their pitching has done despite the injury situation. So, obviously that continues to be a huge strong point for them. I think the issues that you're describing, right, some concerns with Rizzo and his age and a decline in his production, the bullpen stuff is kind of a constant work in progress for every team. And there's always kind of something to be desired there. So, if those are the issues that you're dealing with, usually it means your team's in a pretty good spot. And sure enough, the Yankees are right where they'd like to be. So, it's hard not to feel good about New York right now. Going into my Dodger rant a little bit here. Look, it's the last week and a half has been just not a whole lot of fun. They didn't play very well at home against Arizona. The Bats kind of just decided to go quiet for like 6 days, which it just isn't something that should happen like that, given the talent that's in that lineup. Like, it's a little bit jarring to see it. They lost 5 in a row, starting with the 2 in Arizona, and then they lost all 3 in Cincinnati to the Reds. I will say Saturday and Sunday, with rain passing through and everything else, it just kind of felt like a weird dead weekend for them there. And Friday night was just ugly. I mean, they scored a bunch of runs, but if you're going to walk 9 batters in a baseball game, which is something they've done they've done that 5 or 6 times now this year, where they're walking 9 or more batters, you're just not going to win games that way. And Dodger fans will laugh at me, but Friday night's game was the classic example of why Dave Roberts is a loser of a manager when it comes to the postseason, and ultimately why this team will most likely flame out in the NLDS. I'll tell you right now, once the postseason starts, you can go ahead and chalk up that my hot corner at the end of that episode going into the NLDS is going to be pick the other team on the money line to win the series. You're going to get them at like plus 250. The Dodgers have the worst manager in baseball, and I'll give you an example of why from Friday night. Paxton struggling, not throwing strikes. He's been very hit or miss with that this year. He's had outings where he's like throwing strikes and he's been lights out. He has other outings where he just can't seem to find the zone, and he's liable to give up some gopher balls. But This was one where you're holding on to a 5-4 lead. He just gave up a homer that makes it 5-4. He walks somebody. Okay, 2 outs in the inning. I think that's the right spot to pull him. Right, I don't have an issue with that. Mm-hmm. But in that spot, right, you kind of got the game hanging in the balance, and I get that it's only the 5th inning. They turned to Yohan Ramirez, who was making his debut as a Dodger after he was basically just kicked to the curb by the Mets with a 6.60 ERA so far this season. Dodgers picked him up because they needed a warm body in the bullpen to eat an inning or 2 every once in a while. Fine. But that's who you're turning to in that spot, where you're protecting a 1-run lead with a runner on, and it's classic Dave Roberts, where it's just like, you know what, this is the punch they're not going to see coming, and it's like, yeah, because it's a dumb one. Yeah. Yohan Ramirez comes into the game, goes 3-0 to the first batter, hits him with a pitch, walks the second batter, goes 3-0 to the third batter, hits him with a pitch. The game's now tied 5-5. For some reason, he decides to go to Alex Vesia after that to face the right-handed Jonathan India. Again, just head scratching. It feels like he's just playing roulette with who he chooses to pull out of the bullpen. Vesia comes in. He can't throw a strike either. Goes 3-0 to Jonathan India. Has to come over the middle of the plate. Gives up a grand slam, and the Dodgers are down 9-5. And that was pretty much it for that game. So a little bit lengthy there. I wanted to just kind of walk the audience through, my personal hell that comes up every so often with Dave Roberts during the regular season. And, the only reason I care so much about seeing that in May is I just know come October, like there are going to be moves that don't make any sense. Just this last year, he let Lance Lynn give up 5 home runs in 1 inning in an elimination game. If you're supportive of that guy keeping his job when you're watching that happen year in and year out, it's just hard for me to fathom, or you just don't know ball. So, Dave Roberts as a man, wonderful human being. As a manager, he's awful. We saw a little bit of that. I'm not worried about I'm not worried about the Dodgers. They're going to be fine. They're going to win 100 games, whatever.
Yeah, well, that's certainly true. They will win 100 games, and I'm certain that by the time the postseason comes around, or at least close to it, we are going to see much more Dave Roberts hate coming from Dalton Brown over there, and warranted too. I mean, listen, that was one of the things that frustrated Yankee fans about Aaron Boone was poor management of the bullpen. And that was especially what it was last year and in years past as well. And that could really, that's really, I think, the telltale sign of a good manager and a bad manager is a lot of, how you manage a pitching staff, getting through a season, getting through games, when to use guys, all of that stuff. I think that's a big part of it as well. And I think that probably goes without saying. Our buddy Patrick Brown in the comments here. What's up, fellas? St. Louis Cardinals 8-2 in their last 10 games. Dalton Brown. They're riding high right now. What are they? They're third or something in the NL Central now, I think.
Hey, listen, good for the Cardinals. I don't think I'll put it this way, right? They're looking a little bit less like one of the worst teams in baseball, so I commend them for that. Certainly a sweep over Baltimore at home is impressive. The Cubs are a very formidable team this year. So, look, 5 straight series wins actually for them. Going back to Angels, Red Sox, Orioles, Cubs, Reds. So, it's good to see that team show some life. I'm sorry, Patrick, I am not a believer in the Cardinals overall. I think the pitching is putrid and it is going to keep them from being any kind of real contender this year. But it's good to see them show some life and hey, maybe they'll hang around a bit.
Yeah, it really pissed me off. Survivor Pool when they swept Baltimore in St. Louis the week that I picked them, forcing the Baltimore Orioles, in order to keep me in it, they needed to sweep the White Sox in Chicago. I was like, in a 4-game series, I was like, this is just a nightmare. But they ended up doing it. Which, God, they're shining down on me right now. All right, let's give you a score update before we get into the 1-2-3 inning. Pirates and Tigers had a doubleheader today. Tigers took the first one 8-0. Tariq Skubal was phenomenal in that game. 7 innings, 3 hits. I mean, we're going to touch on this a little bit later, but he really does kind of look like the front runner for the American League Cy Young Award. He's lights out right now there in Detroit. Pirates and Tigers again, 10-2. The Pirates took that one. That was the Paul Skeens start for them. Skeens again, a pretty solid outing. I mean, again, not the prettiest. 9 Ks though in 6 innings. For Paul Skeens. Listen, he's gonna rack up Ks no matter what, dude. His stuff is nasty.
Yeah, and how high are our expectations for a guy when 6 innings, 2 runs, 9 Ks, 1 walk, 3 hits? When that's just considered like not the prettiest.
Yeah.
How high are our expectations for this guy? And deservedly so. But yeah, I mean, he continues to look like the real deal, which. We kind of all thought he was anyway. He got 2.45 ERA now, and I don't think it's necessarily a fluke at all. I mean, he's for real.
Yeah, no, he is very, very legit. I will say that. So that, by the way, that split doubleheader between the Pirates and Tigers ended up with a final score, if you combine 2 games, of 10-10. Very, very nice. That's awesome. Speaking of the St. Louis Cardinals taking a road win against Cincinnati, 5-3 today. Andre Palante was the winning pitcher in that one. 6 innings, 3 hits, none earned in that start for him. Texas Rangers took a game from the Arizona Diamondbacks in the World Series rematch in Texas, 6-1. Phillies topped the Giants in San Francisco, 6-1. The Dodgers taking a 10-3 win over the Mets in Queens with a hilarious ending, right? Jorge Lopez getting ejected by the third base umpire, Ramon de Jesus, and then throwing his glove into the stands out of frustration.
Watching that game, like, and for me, I'm watching these games on extra innings. So when the Dodgers are on the road, I'm watching the opposing team's broadcast.
Yeah.
The Mets broadcast when they're struggling like this is a delight. I mean, they're just a mess. And listening to Gary Cohn and Ron Darling dealing with this team, just showing bad body language, like looking like they're out of it. I mean, Ron Darling was sitting there saying he's like, well, I mean, really, they got swept in this series when they blew the lead in the first game yesterday. This is just a team that doesn't look, he said something along the lines of they don't look very interested to be out there. I thought it was just laugh out loud funny as a Dodger fan and as somebody who likes to laugh at the Mets. There were Mets fans who were telling me preseason they were a 90-win team. They were never a 90-win team. They are who we thought they were. If they're smart, they'll sell in some capacity as the summer goes along, because I don't think it's going to get a whole lot better there. And I got to be honest, too. I mean, if you like just watching the body language from guys like McNeil, obviously Jorge Lopez and some of the others there, like it just, I don't know a ton about the manager they've got in there now. Obviously, they want to give him time, but man, it doesn't look good as far as like the headspace of that clubhouse.
Yeah, no, their new manager Carlos Mendoza was the bench coach of the Yankees last year, and they, when they hired him in the offseason, I was really kind of curious about that. And again, it's not to say that he's doing a bad job. It's very, very early to tell. And the Mets are not a very talented baseball team at the moment, so it's tough to win games, especially in a good NL East, as far as the Phillies and the Braves are concerned. But I do think it's kind of funny because I'm one of my best friends is a die-hard Mets fan. He was he was my best man at my wedding. And the story is about the Mets is that they've, as soon as the Wilpons sold the team to Steve Cohen, like it was going to change everything. And I'm like, I'm telling you right now, I'm like, and I'm one of those Yankee fans that actually likes it when the Mets do well. I enjoy when the Mets are good, but I'm like, listen, it's going to take one or two bad seasons from the Mets, and they are obviously going to turn on Steve Cohen. And that's exactly what happened. Like they bought Verlander and Scherzer and all. They spent all this money. They had a $360 million payroll, and it just didn't matter. They couldn't win baseball games this year. They kind of cut it out from everybody underneath them. They go out after Yamamoto and nobody else, and now everybody's all pissed because they're.
Here's the thing, and this is where you kind of are looking toward the Mets from sort of a third party perspective, right? Like you're not a Mets fan.
No.
Mets fans are like a special kind of attention seeking, where it's like anytime things are going wrong for them, they're like, "Hey, look at us and pity us because of how hard we have it." And then the moment they get hot for any period of time, they're peak obnoxious, right? So my message to Mets fans, and I say the same thing to like Cowboys fans in the NFL, which you and I have had that conversation before, right? My message to Mets fans is like pick a side, right? Like either be the Cubs, who are like the forever lovable losers, right? Or be the Yankees and be obnoxious winners. But if you're gonna be both like whiny losers and obnoxious winners, like I just can't handle you. So I make no bones about it on this podcast. I enjoy watching the Mets struggle. I hope they continue to do so in eternity.
That's right. It's two of the worst things you can be in life is an obnoxious loser, an obnoxious winner, and a whiny loser. And Mets fans are somehow both.
Yeah.
Oh man, I love it. So anyway, Dodgers took a 10-3 win in Queens over the Mets, and the Marlins with a 9-1 win in San Diego against the Padres. Listen, man, I would like to say that the Marlins have given up on this season. They certainly have, but it's not like they're winning, less games with Luis Arraez than when they did have him. I do think that is kind of funny, but anyway, so as far as games that are currently in progress, the Baltimore Orioles with a 5-1 lead in the against the Red Sox in Baltimore, heading into the 7th. A's and Rays are tied at 1 in the bottom of the 5th. In Tampa, the Braves with a 1-0 lead over the Nationals in the top of the fourth.
I want to touch on that Braves game too. This kid starting for them, Spencer Schwellenbach.
Yeah.
He's a guy to watch out for. I picked him up in fantasy to make the start tonight because this is a dude who's been really dominant in the minors, and everything that I've heard about him is that he's a guy that's like ready for the big league level. And I want to take just a moment, and I'm not here to just beat down nonstop on the Mets, but this speaks to the difference organizationally between teams like the Braves and Dodgers and teams like the Mets and Padres, right? What makes those two sets of teams different is they all spend money, right? They're all willing to invest in their team to make them better. But the Braves and Dodgers invest in the farm, right? These are teams that invest in developing through their system as well. The Padres seemingly only develop prospects so they can shell them out to buy high on other guys. And I'm not saying that the Padres as a player development org are horrible, but I mean, you look at the guys who come up as top prospects for the Mets, that they almost never reach that potential. And this is like the Mets want to bitch and moan about what makes them different from the Braves. That's it right there. The Braves can home grow talent and they can go get talent.
Yeah.
The Mets, the only way they can seem to get talent in that door is to go get it because they can't grow it. So I just wanted to touch on that and Spencer Schwellenbach, having a guy like that you can just call up, right? Who's been pitching to a 1.8 ERA in the minors. He's already into a fourth scoreless inning tonight against the Nationals. Yep. That's part of what makes the Braves different.
Yeah. I think it's according to. I think it's either. I want to say it's MLB Pipeline, but I think Schwellenbach is their number 3 overall prospect in their system. And listen, you're 100% right as far as player development. You can make the argument that nobody right now, and maybe it's just a little bit biased because of their current regime of players, but you can make the argument right now that nobody develops talent better than Braves. I mean, like they pretty much all of their guys are homegrown.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple teams that you could argue are like in the same category with them, but it's hard to argue that anybody's above them, right? Like I think the Dodgers go into that category. I think that the Rays go into that category. Of course, they struggle to hold on to that talent, right? The Orioles, they've done a good job with that, right?
Sure,
so, but yeah, I mean but that's the thing, right? Like you gotta, people talk about, the Dodgers are bought or this team's bought. No, man, like the only teams that are bought that also win are the teams that are not just bought but also developed. So I just wanted to touch on that for a moment.
Yeah, no, definitely. White Sox and Blue Jays in the top of the third. They are scoreless. The Royals with a 4-1 lead over the Twins in Minnesota heading into the bottom of the third. Listen, man, and I don't want to spend too long on this, but the Twins are kind of losing ground in the Central pretty fast. Like they're getting to a point where like the Royals and the Guardians are pretty steep above them now. I wanted to say the last time I checked, the Twins were like 7.5 back. They're 6.5 back right now of the Guardians in first place. It's early in the season still. We're about a third of the way through, but that's significant ground to make up even now.
Yeah, I mean, it's something. I still think the Twins win that division, to be honest with you. I will say, like, the Royals, that pitching staff is pretty real. Like Seth Lugo being a guy, right? You talk about another guy that came up through the Met system. They couldn't figure out how to find successful. Not to keep, digging on the Mets, but
bang.
What it is, right? Like here's another guy who came up through the Mets and was never this with the Mets. So, Seth Lugo, he's pitching well tonight in Minnesota. But the Royals are fun. The Guardians are fraudulent. Also, look, if it's the end of July and they're still on top of that division, I'll eat crow. But for now, they're still fraudulent.
Okay. Well, hey, we have a deadline now. We have a deadline for when you eat crow. I picked him again in Survivor Pool. It's do or die for me again, man. But Cubs right now behind on the Brewers. It's 2-1 right now. Milwaukee in Milwaukee heading into the bottom of the third. And then again, some later games tonight. The Guardians play the Rockies in Colorado tonight. Logan Allen getting the start against Ty Block in Colorado. I don't remember the last time Ty Block. Did Ty Block make a start last year? I don't even know. But he's been in the league for a while.
He's been in Colorado for a couple years now. Kind of just putzing around, getting some starts here or there. One thing about Ty Block, for the audience who does not watch a lot of Ty Block, he owns the Dodgers. Like, I'm telling you right now, the Rockies are in LA this weekend. If Ty Block gets a start maybe Sunday, and the
Smash
Dodgers
that.
are giving Will Smith a day off, and you're going to be looking at the Rockies at like plus 290, plus 300. It's not a bad spot to bet Colorado, maybe
Yeah.
first five, because Ty Block owns the Dodgers. I don't know why. Just a little note.
Yeah, see, there you go. That's why we keep you around there, Dalton Brown. The Astros and Mariners kicking off tonight, 9:40 p.m. Verlander versus Kirby tonight. That's a pretty solid pitching matchup. Veteran versus the young kid. And then it is Yankees Angels in Anaheim. Luis Gil on the bump against Tyler Anderson. Tyler Anderson's been pretty good this year, 2.5 ERA for the lefty in Anaheim. That's our first score update. All right, so let's dive into the nitty gritty. The 1, 2, 3 inning. Our first out. Negro League statistics are now being counted within the Major League Baseball database. They're entering into the record books. What does that mean? So, and also, that's also not the only element of this. Negro League families are now getting Major League Baseball benefits from the last thing I read as well. They are now being entered into the pension system and all of that stuff, which is
awesome.
I think
awesome,
phenomenal. It's absolutely fantastic. So, but as far as statistically speaking, I think that at this point, right, with how seriously baseball takes stats, right, baseball stats, I think in a way are kind of sacred. It is it gets taken pretty seriously. So right now, Josh Gibson, who the maybe the best Negro League player of all time, former catcher, 372 batting average, now the all-time leader. I believe he is now also the all-time leader in OPS. Yes, he is. He's the all-time leader in slugging. It changes a lot of things in the record book. So it brings up a big debate piece because obviously, again, under the circumstances, it's very, very hard to compare eras, and it's very already it really was. But I kind of just want to get your thoughts on this. What did you make of this whole announcement? It kind of came out of nowhere, right? Because the Major League Baseball acknowledged the Negro Leagues, or at least some of the Negro Leagues, as professional Major League Baseball leagues back in 2020. And this is now 4 years later, and we're getting this sort of this story coming up now. I kind of found it as a bit of a surprise. So what do you make of this whole thing, Dalton? Kind of lead us off here.
I mean, so this type of statistical integration is never going to be perfectly smooth, and I think speaking at least for myself, that's fine. Look, there are going to be people out there who are going to point at some of these statistical leaderboards and say, well, they're not playing seasons that were as long, right? And therefore putting up these stats over a season or putting up these stats over a career, the sample sizes are different, and so it needs an asterisk and blah blah blah. Look, listen, it's not perfect, especially when we're talking about rate stats. I get it, but at the same time, we are not, any of us, in a position to sit here and act as if we think things are perfect from the 30s and 40s and 20s in Major League Baseball either, right? So at the end of the day, we already look at stats from that era with a little bit of a grain of salt, right? We literally have an era in baseball that we call the dead ball era. So this idea that Josh Gibson taking over spots at the top of the leaderboard being something that needs an asterisk or isn't deserved in some capacity. Who are we to suggest that the Negro League was any less than the majors during those times? We don't know. And at the end of the day, what matters most is that the representation is happening now, right? To me, the positives that come from that representation, that comes from the pension stuff you were mentioning, right? The number of people who had never heard of Josh Gibson before 2 days ago that are now landing on his baseball reference page, right? And reading about him and what a great player he was. That's a good thing. And any negatives that we're concerned about from a statistical standpoint, I think there's some debate to be had there and fine, but it's just not where the conversation needs to be right now. The conversation right now should be, hey, what an awesome opportunity to celebrate guys like Gibson, Oscar Charleston, Buck Leonard, Judd Wilson, all these guys, right? Like it's a cool thing that we're able to celebrate that now, and I think that's where the focus should really be right now.
Yeah. So here's the thing, and I've since yesterday, I've really kind of thought about this relatively heavily, right? And one of the things that you bring up is pretty interesting because, like, for a baseball junkie like myself, I knew who Josh Gibson was, but I also didn't know like the extent of Negro League baseball. I never really took the effort into looking into Negro League baseball until yesterday. Like I just didn't because it never occurred to me. My thought didn't. The thoughts in my head did not go that deep. Simply, um, you are right. I think in the grand scheme of things, does it necessarily matter in that much of a capacity? No, it doesn't. And to be honest, I think it matters to a point where, like, okay, is having Josh Gibson ahead of Ty Cobb now as an all-time leading player, despite the fact that he played 2,500 less games. Like, there are definitely going to be people that say, like, yeah, there's going to be an asterisk next to that. And that was one of the things that I've been talking about with a few buddies of mine. I mean, our guy, Barry Grant Jr., I had a conversation with him earlier today, and it was more of a debate of, like, does it create more problems than it solves, right? Because I've always kind of, looked at, and I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say I've always looked at it, but whenever it gets brought up to me, Negro League baseball players were in a way in themselves like mythical, right? Because what they were is that as they were excluded, as rooted in evil as it was, they've been excluded from Major League Baseball, and kind of the way that those stories were told about Negro League baseball players were like, oh man, did you look at Josh Gibson and how, like, man, if he played Major League Baseball for 20 years, man, he would have hit whatever, 700 home runs, and he would have been one of the all-time greats, and he would have been all this. And listen, again, there can be a debate about that no matter what. But now it also kind of like brings up the question of, like, now when people look at Josh Gibson and people like Josh Gibson, right? Oscar Charleston, whoever else, like, is it better for them to be, or is it better, I guess, better for the whole conversation for them to be recognized in the stat books, but maybe with an asterisk next to their name, right? Like, is that actually better for the conversation? Like, do you kind of get what I'm saying here?
I just, like, to me, if you're going to put an asterisk on Negro League statistics because of number of games played, like, I understand the thought process, like I can follow it. But I just think that, like, if that's where we're going to start putting asterisks, then there are a lot of other places that you could make a similar
Oh
argument
yeah,
with asterisks, right?
certainly.
Like, you could all, like given what we saw, like there were guys who came over from the Negro Leagues and dominated, right? I mean, some of the
Oh yeah.
biggest in baseball history. And so if we're going to put asterisks on the Negro Leagues, then we should put asterisks on Major League Baseball pre-integration too, right? Like,
Mhm.
to me, the whole thing, like turning it into to a debate, like, is just kind of not the direction that I look at it.
Mhm.
I look at it as one of those things that's just like, okay, awesome, yeah, it messes with the leaderboards a little bit. Like, people are going to know who the Negro League guys are and who the Major League guys are, and it can create some fun conversation of, like, man, like, I wonder like, if we'd gotten to see Gibson and Cobb on the same field, like, what would that have looked like, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
I think it's fun to imagine these things, and I think at the end of the day, man, we're talking about baseball statistics from between 1920 and 1950. Like, we don't take those that seriously to begin with. So,
It's true.
like, in that sense, like, there's no, like, I can't. I'll put it this way: I can't think of a real downside to it. Like,
Mhm.
it's more inclusive. It adds more history to our game, right, and more to learn
Yeah.
about our game. It's, I just don't see it as anything more than a good thing.
Yeah. No, and I think most of the people that are going to disagree, right? And like I said, when this first came out, I'll be honest, my initial reaction was, well, that doesn't really seem right, right? Because, like, it just, like, yeah, obviously, given the circumstances, like I said, but my initial reaction was, but they never played in the like. Do you know what I mean? Like it just my initial reaction was that, but again, I'm kind of falling in line a little bit with you in a sense of like, all right, like really what is there to really be upset about? Because again, like you bring up a very, very, very good point, and it was something that I was going to bring up if you didn't, was we already in sports, not even just baseball, just in sports, struggle so mightily to compare numbers cross generationally, right? But like people, like believe it or not, right? Like comparing LeBron versus Jordan is cross generational. The sports were different, right? And especially, I mean, it might be even more so. It might be the most so in baseball because nothing could be more different than baseball in 2020 and baseball in 1920, where the ball was different, the fields were different, that like everything was different.
Like, look, if you dropped Patrick Corbin onto the field in 1935, like he might be the best pitcher in baseball.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, I mean, and maybe
we don't know, right? But like the point I'm trying to make is I think all of the evidence that we have, and this is not just baseball, this is across sports, is that we are getting better at building our athletes. We're getting better, like the science of it, the coaching of it, the perfection of the equipment, right? Like human beings are getting bigger and stronger with time. We always have. Yeah. And so, like to me, comparing era versus era has always been kind of a silly thing, and I think everything in order to be understood needs to be viewed within its context. You know, and that even goes for Jordan and LeBron, right? I mean,
yeah,
the game was played differently in those eras. The athletes were different in those eras, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so that's yeah. I mean, I think we're kind of on the same page in that sense. Where like for me, it's just like, well, we already don't like if you were to ask me who's the best baseball player I've ever seen play the game,
yeah,
it's got for me it's got to be a modern guy if we're trying to be like perfectly technical about it, right? I mean, like if you put him on the field, who's the best player? It's going to be Trout, Ohtani,
it's
right?
probably Ohtani. Yeah, right, exactly.
But there's no point in viewing things that way because if you view things that way, it's only whoever the most recent guy is. You know what I mean?
Right.
So in that sense, I think it's fun to add this stuff into the record book, right? It's an opportunity for us to learn more about guys like Josh, like Josh Gibson, right? I mean, it's an opportunity for us to acknowledge more of history, and yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm not. As I've kind of had time to think about it, I'm just kind of finding myself like, I don't really. I don't want to like. I don't think saying that I don't care is the right phrase, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Like, I don't necessarily have like a deep rooted problem with it. One of the things that I think is kind of interesting is that like Negro League stats back then were not kept to the same degree of what Major League stats were. So, like, regardless of the amount of research, this is one of the things that I kind of just don't buy mostly is that I don't know that all of these numbers are really all that accurate, but like that's really kind of what I'm getting because if you're getting most of your stuff from like old newspaper scraps and stuff like that, and that's really where you're finding most of this stuff because you're finding incomplete box scores for games and which games were official and which ones weren't and all of that stuff. I feel like it could be very, very hard. But at the same time, you're also looking at Major League Baseball that's probably been doing this research for 25 years and, really trying to piece it all together. But yeah, so that's the big story right now in Major League Baseball. And a lot of people I'm sure are going to look at it positively. I'm sure a lot of people are going to get all up and tight about it and look at it in a negative light. So again,
I'll put it this way: anything that brings Turkey Stearns, who won a quadruple crown in the Negro Leagues, which is incredible, right? Anybody who and by that I mean he led the league in doubles, triples, home runs, and stolen bases. Like anything that brings him, he also worked in a grocery store. He was nicknamed Turkey because he would run around while puffing his chest out, and that was kind of like a just kind of part of how he looked as a player. And like, what a cool player to learn about, right? Like the number of stories that are being read about these guys right now. Like to me, I'm like you're not saying anything that I think is absurd, right? Or that I like super vehemently disagree with. I just think that this stuff's so cool and it kind of outweighs it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. No, and really, I think the root of my distaste for this subject or where this subject is that like I just see so many people on Twitter and stuff like that are saying like, I saw this tweet from Dan Clark where it was like if you have any problem with this, you're just being a racist and that's simple. And it's that simple. I'm like, well, just hold on a minute. I'm like, can we not like that? I think is really the big problem of a lot of these conversations is the overwhelming like overreaction of like, I'm set in my opinion and that's just that. Right. Like I can't wrap my head around like, yeah, certainly there are going to be people out there that are not going to like this because of reasons that we don't really want to air out on air. But I would argue that probably most people don't have an issue with this for a lot of the reasons that I described. And it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, look, I think the reality is that, like, while there are a lot of people like you, Mike, there are also a lot of people out there who, like, genuinely are a little bit nefarious and having an issue with it.
Probably.
So, like, to me, parsing out who's who, man, I would just rather learn about these dudes, man.
Yeah.
I would just rather learn about these dudes. Like, it's a cool thing. So,
that's
but,
fine.
I hear you.
So our buddy Bryson Carver comes in on this. Y'all hit on some great points regarding how we view players from past eras, particularly pre-1970. To me, the best part of this is convos about those players as well as American history as a whole. Bryson's a massive history buff. As we know it, he was doing shows, podcasts on presidents, however long ago, a year or two ago. More than anything, we get education on the past, and I think that's always a good thing. Again, a lot of what you're talking about there, Dalton. So as we move on to out number 2, let's get into some current stuff, right? So Ronald Acuna is out for the year. And I mean, listen, it's a big blow, but I would be like, I would be really like doing a disservice if I didn't point out like Acuna's year was not going very well, right?
Yeah.
Like Ronald Acuna was hitting 250, 4 homers, 15 RBIs, and it's not like he wasn't getting the at bats. He had 192 at bats before he went down. His OPS was 716. Like he just wasn't producing at the level that we're used to him producing. So I'll give you my quick opinion on this, really, fast, but I almost don't know that losing him is that big of a deal right now. Like if the production is what like if that was the production you were going to get all year, and there's more than a chance that he was going to catch fire in July like Aaron Judge is now, and he was just going to catapult this whole thing. I don't know that at his current production rate, this is that big of a deal. I don't know that it is. Dalton, tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, look, Ronald Acuna Jr. is, the guy just won an NL MVP, so I'm not saying anything revolutionary to say that he's one of the best players in baseball.
No.
He's also just an electric player to watch. And so in general, I think it's always a big deal when a guy of his stature gets hurt. But your point's well taken regarding not only his production this season, but also the depth of the Braves, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
You can't really talk about this without mentioning the fact that unfortunately the same thing happened in 2021 and the Braves won the World Series without Ronald Acuna. Now, again, right, like the Braves are better with than without when it comes to Ronald Acuna Jr. I am not trying to suggest anything to the contrary of that, but we've seen them win with this roster before. And like I want to read you the Braves lineup tonight against the Nationals, and like you tell me. Right. I mean, we're talking Ozzie Albies, Austin Riley, Marcell Ozuna, Matt Olson, Travis d'Arnaud, Adam Duvall, Michael Harris, Orlando Arcia, Jared Kelenic. That's a lineup, dude. Like,
that's not a bad lineup at all.
Like Michael Harris, Orlando Arcia, and Jared Kelenick's your bottom 3. Like, that's still a team that can absolutely mash. And it's kind of like with their pitching staff, right? Where it's like they lose Strider, and then you look at what's left, and you're like, They're still really good.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of still where I land on them. I also we both know this team is going to go out at the deadline and get Jorge Soler, right? They're going to go get a couple outfielders and fill that gap because the Braves are really good at that. They did that really
Yeah,
well.
like Jorge Soler and maybe Jorge Soler.
And look, if the D-backs continue to struggle, do they move to Jock Peterson?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
There are going to be names out there that are worth going after.
Yeah.
I even wonder about a team like the Rays eventually, right? If the Rays continue to struggle, do they move Randy Arozarena?
Would the Blue Jays consider moving George Springer to play right field?
Probably. The Nationals are going to be moving Lane Thomas. There are names out there that are going to be available that I think the Braves are going to go after. And if I know the Braves, they're going to probably go get 2 more outfielders to fill that spot. So it sucks for baseball. It sucks for the Braves and their fans. I still think that team is a World Series contender. I've got more on them later when we get to the hot corner.
Yeah, no, I certainly think that they are as well. Like you said with the lineup earlier, it's just you've got plenty of depth. They're so good at developing players. They can just figure out. By the way, I didn't realize how many of his relatives are Major League Baseball players or were Major League Baseball players. He has Vicente Campos, Alcides Escobar, Edwin Escobar, and Kelvin Escobar are all his cousins, and Jose Escobar is his nephew. He is the nephew of Jose Escobar. Excuse me, but that's bizarre to me. But anyway, like I said, I don't know that in the grand scheme of things, if the production that you were getting from Ronald Acuna when he went down is easily replaceable because it just wasn't that great. I would argue that you could actually do better, but again, like you said, it's more about, it does kind of really blow for the game. I mean, he's a fun player to watch. It's a fun team to watch, and it's much more fun to watch when he's playing. So that's a big part of this as well. But all right, let's go to the third out here because here's the thing. Luis Gil, for me, I think needs to be considered potentially for the American League Cy Young. Just to give you an idea, okay? 6-1, not that really matters, but a 2.11 ERA in 10 starts, 55 and a third innings pitched. He's got 70 strikeouts. His whip is 1.012. I just look, if I can pull it up real quick, let me just see, because the last time I checked, he's fairly up there as far as pitching leaders as well. Right now, he is in the American League. American League right now, he is.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
You want to know why you're struggling to find Luis Gil in the leaderboards?
Why is that?
Because he doesn't qualify for almost any of the rate-based stats. Because he's 39th in the American League in innings pitched. So he's not going to show up on the ERA leaderboards. He's not going to show up on the WHIP leaderboards. And I'm kind of tipping my hand here as far as why I'm not quite viewing him as a Cy Young contender yet. Which is not to take away from Luis Gil, but that's my that's kind of my 2 cents as you pull up some fun stats for us here.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm kind of, here's the thing. Is obviously innings pitched is a big deal, right? That's not a secret or anything like that. I'm trying to see how he compares as far as starts. Yeah, he's falling about a start or 2 short of.
He'll be qualified after tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know that that's really going to be an issue here, but where he would rank as far as ERA in the American League is 5th. Lugo, Tanner Houck, Reese Elson, Tariq Skubal. I think the last time I checked, it was 3rd. It was just Lugo and Skubal. I guess Tanner Houck and Reese Elson put together great starts before. He was among the top 3 in WHIP. Here's really my main argument about this. And again, it might be pretty weak, but I'm going to do it anyway. So if you were to replace Luis Gil's name with Garrett Cole's name, I think that he would absolutely be in the discussion. Like, I don't think it would even be a question. Like, yes, would he be the leader? Maybe not. But if Garrett Cole was the name up there instead of Luis Gil, I think most baseball talk shows, including our own, would be talking about a potential back-to-back Cy Young year for Garrett Cole.
So here's the thing, and you just touched on it, right? Back-to-back Cy Young year.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen this from Garrett Cole for how many years now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Garrett Cole's a known commodity. So if Garrett Cole were doing what Luis Gil would be doing, like, we as a baseball world would be like, we've been trained to take that seriously because we know what Garrett Cole is, right? Yeah. This is the guy, he's pitched 300 games in his career, 145 and 75, 3.17 career area, 1.09 career WHIP. Like, this is a guy on his way to a potential Hall of Fame induction, right?
Yeah,
so,
right.
Like, we know who and what Garrett Cole is and has always been. Like, I love what Luis Gil is doing. He's on my fantasy team. He's been carrying me. It's been awesome. Like, I'm hoping he does the same thing and beats up on the Angels tonight, partially because fuck the Angels and they're not from LA. But, I love what Luis Gil is doing. Don't get me wrong. But, like, let's zoom out a little bit here. This is a guy who even this April posted the ERA over 4. And he's been dominant in May. Don't get me wrong, right? ERA, I think, is like half a run in May. He's been awesome. But, like, we cannot rule out this being like a Jeremy Linsanity run yet. And when you have been great for this short an amount of time, like, you can't make an argument to me that Luis Gil deserves more love right now than a Reese Olson, than a Seth Lugo, right? Other guys who you could argue are on Linsanity runs right now.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, right? I get that he's wearing the Yankee cap and the pinstripes and he's getting more attention than those guys arguably because of that. And he deserves the attention. Don't get me wrong. Like, I want to be clear here. I'm not trying to take away from how awesome Luis Gil's been. But I think we have to zoom out when we think about who do we actually think is going to win the Cy Young. Like, he's not in that discussion yet for me. Like, I'm not saying he can't get there. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve the hype and the love. And I love that we're pointed out on this show. But, like, he's not pitching enough innings. He's not pitching deep enough into games. I have my concerns as to whether they're even going to keep him in the rotation when Cole is healthy. At the end of the day, we're talking about one incredibly elite month. I'm pumping the brakes until I see more, but I'm excited for him.
Yeah. I will just point this out as you just brought it up. If they pull him out of the rotation when Garrett Cole comes back, I will blow a gasket. Like, I will actually march my ass down to Yankee Stadium and start banging on the building. Like it's really going to be.
You videotape it and post it to the podcast Twitter feed?
Absolutely, I would. You think I would rob our audience of that kind of commentary? Absolutely not. But regardless, like, so, okay, let me pose this question, right? And this might just be like a ballpark answer. So if Luis Gil gives you another month or so of great baseball, is that enough or no? Like how long? Like that's the thing, is like the aura of a fresh new arm that the market isn't bought in on yet. When does that wear off? Right? Like, does it come after a season? Does it come after a summer? Does it come at like where does that line fall for you?
So it depends on where you draw the lines around what is the market. I think people like who are in baseball and into baseball day in and day out will buy in. Like, I'd say if you give me half a season of what he's doing right now, then like that should be another 2 months, I think, before you get to like an actual half season of this type of production.
Yeah, I'll probably need 4 or 5 more starts. Yeah.
Then like amazing, right? But still, there's a reason that like we don't look. I'm trying to think of other guys who kind of fall into this. Like Tyler Mahle, right? Like, we've seen Tyler Mahle, who's currently hurt right now for the Rangers. We've seen him look like a Cy Young caliber arm for them.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen Edinson Volquez look like a Cy Young caliber pitcher for half a season.
Yeah.
Like we're like it's like, to me, 2 months from now, I'll look at him the way I'm looking at Ranger Suarez now, which is like, maybe this guy's elite, right?
Yeah, right.
But like, to truly cement yourself as one of the elite pitchers in the game, you got to do it for a little while. So again, I hate that I'm playing this side on Luis Gil, because I'm really enjoying watching his success, and I'm rooting for him. But somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, it burns you to your core. I can see it. You're laughing at me with my Yankee hat on. Oh, man. All right, that wraps it up for the 1-2-3 inning. Let's get you another score update here. So do we have any more games to completion? No, we don't, actually. So this one's going to be a short one. Hey, check this out. All right, so the Orioles right now, again, 6-1 over the Red Sox in Baltimore, heading into the bottom of the 8th. Rays and A's right now knotted at 2 in the top of the 7th. The Nationals take a 3-1 lead over the Braves in Atlanta in the top of the 6th. The Blue Jays are on the board, 2-0 over the White Sox heading into the 5th. Royals over the Twins, 6-1 in the bottom of the 5th. Brewers and Cubs. The Brewers right now with a 7-2 lead in Milwaukee in the top of the 5th. And the Cleveland Guardians putting up 2 runs in the first inning against the Colorado Rockies in tie block to fortify my efforts in Survivor Pool. If you can't tell, right? If you're a viewer, you can't tell. I take the Survivor Pool very, very seriously. I really do.
It's a ton of fun. It's something more people should do during baseball season.
It is, man. It is fun.
For context for the audience, the way the Survivor Pool works is you pick a team for a week, and that team has to go 500 or better from that Monday through Sunday week. 500 cuts it, but if they go below 500, you get eliminated. You can't pick the same team twice. We are on our second iteration of it. We got about 9 people playing. I'm expecting we'll probably go through 4 or 5 iterations of it before the end of the season. It's just kind of a fun thing where you're going to either win $100 and some odd or you're going to lose 25. And we'll, over the course of a full season, you're maybe risking $100, $125, but it's a lot of fun. I am on the Rays this week, mostly because with Memorial Day weekend, I did not really realize it was Monday when it was Monday. And so the only team left for me to pick was going to be Tampa or Oakland.
Oh, no.
So I need the Rays to figure it out and handle business with Oakland, because it does not get much easier for them this weekend when they go to Baltimore.
They go to Baltimore, and they took a 3-0 loss to the A's in yesterday's game, and they're tied right now 2-2. You kind of need them to take 2 out of 3 with the A's at home.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I mean, they kind of need to take 2 out of 3 from the A's at home. I mean, like, Rays, you're 26-29. You're in one of baseball's toughest divisions. Like, you should probably be beating the A's when they come into your building.
Yeah. Just a thought. Listen, we touch on it almost every week, Dalton. Those pesky damn A's, man. They really are. They are pesky. They're not good, but they're pesky. All right, so that does it for our second live score update. Again, we're doing that every week now, just because, again, we've got live baseball. That's what we're going to give you. I was thinking maybe we should touch on this today, but we're running a little late on time. We could touch on this next week. Because Luis Arraez is, I mean, like, as much as, first of all, he's been absolutely amazing for San Diego since he's gotten traded. Now, how amazing, you say? Well, his numbers this season or through his career at this point look a lot like Tony Gwynn. Do you buy all that? Like, are we kind of ready? Because Luis, he's been in the league for 6 years. Like, we kind of established now that he's this kind of hitter, right? Rookie season, he hits 334, 321 in 2020, hits 294 in 2021, 316, 354. He wins the batting title, right? Like 332 this year. He's hitting 379 in San Diego since he's gotten traded. Are we ready to not call this comparison crazy?
No.
No, you're not ready yet.
No, look, So it's fun because he's with the Padres now, and I get it. Like there have been like some Gwynn-esque stretches for him.
Yeah.
He's a similar type of player, which is fun. Um, but like I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves.
Hmm.
Like especially like Tony Gwynn won 5 Gold Gloves.
Yeah.
Luis Arraez is not a good defender.
He's not a good defender. You're right.
You know, like we're also talking about a 15-time All-Star. Talking about a 7-time Silver Slugger Award winner, an 8-time NL batting champion. We're talking about a guy with 3,000 hits. Like, you don't need me to tell you how good Tony Gwynn was.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, like,
And he did it for forever. I mean, like that's the thing is he was winning batting titles at 38 years old.
exactly. You know? And like, don't like look. If Luis Arraez does what he's doing now for like 10 more consecutive years, okay, yeah, we can have that conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, you know, good for Luis Arraez. He's a heck of a player. I've heard amazing things about him in general, with just like the clubhouse presence that he is.
Yeah.
You know, I heard good things about him when he was with the Twins. Just a really well liked guy. You heard good. Same thing with the Marlins. Same thing with the Padres. So easy dude to root for. Like it's cool to see a guy who's doing it differently than everybody else, which he absolutely is. But the Tony Gwynn comparison, I think, is a little bit unfair to everybody involved.
Yeah. Well, hey, and it probably is. But you know, like I have a kind of a theory of why I think it's happening, because like Luis Arraez, I think for a lot of traditional baseball guys is a bit of a breath of fresh air. Like Luis Arraez is not, technically speaking, for people that are not, big into the knowledge of analytics, he's not an analytically driven player. He's very contact first, right? He's a traditional, maybe minus the bona fide speed, but he's a traditional leadoff kind of hitter. And a lot of guys are kind of tired of, especially these old school guys are tired of seeing Kyle Schwarber hit leadoff. Like,
I want to push back on a little bit of that. The idea that like Luis Arraez is not a player that analytics would love or is analytically driven, right?
Yeah.
I don't think analytics are against like hitting for contact if you can do it as well as Luis Arraez can.
Yeah.
Right. But he's a special talent. And so like I think analytics allows space for certain guys that can transcend like what we think we should overall be prioritizing in baseball, which is, backspinning the baseball, hit it in the air, hitting home runs, like on base percent, getting on base, taking your walks, right? All like, I think a guy like Luis Arraez, who's like a free swinger, puts the bat on the ball, can hit the ball for average, right? Like, I think part of it is that he is so uniquely skilled at it that the analytics do support hitting that way if you're Luis Arraez.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that like it doesn't like if you told Kyle Schwarber, hey man, are you watching what Luis Arraez is doing?
Do that.
Like that's proof that you need to chill on the analytics, right? Like it sounds ridiculous because it is.
Yeah.
So I do want to pump the brakes a little bit on suggesting that Luis Arraez is like a case against analytics. I think he's just different dude, So that's my 2 cents there.
No. And I think that you're right on that. That's kind of why I said like for people that are not necessarily like what's the word? The aura around analytics is, they throw in the traditional leadoff hitter out the window. But again, he's a special dude. So yeah, it's just something I wanted to touch on a little bit briefly. Angel Hernandez is retired now. Can we rejoice as baseball fans today?
There are still a lot of really bad umpires out there. I can make an argument that like CB Buckner is worse than Hernandez. So I think umpiring is still not the best part of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
I think the robo umps are coming, and I've kind of turned a corner on that to where I think it's going to be a good thing. But hey, it's one less horrendous umpire out there.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, I've had this conversation with my father a million times, right? I've been an umpire since I was 12 years old. I've been umpiring for 15 years. So I understand kind of how difficult this can be. And I always found it that the higher level you go up, in umpiring, the easier the games get because the baseball's cleaner, right? Like you don't have to see, some 9-year-old kid bobble a ball, then throw the ball to first base. He bobbles the ball, and the runner hits the base, and then it's a nightmare. And then you got parents screaming at you, whatever. So it gets easier as they get older. And me at this point. I am the biggest umpire defender maybe on planet Earth. I defend umpires like you wouldn't believe. And I couldn't defend Angel Hernandez. I just couldn't. I was searching for reasons to defend this dude. I really was. I was defending him when he made bad calls. I really was. Like, if there were calls that were like kind of borderline, I'd be like, all right, come on. Like, a lot of umpires make that call, and it's not right, but it's a razor thin margin of where you can see why he called that a strike or why he called him out or whatever it is. There were calls where Angel Hernandez wasn't even close. I was just like, I've gotten to a point where I couldn't even defend the guy anymore. And you bring up a good point. CB Buckner is kind of getting to that point for me as well. So, it's funny, man. It really is. Oh boy. All right. All right. Best segment ever. Dalton's Hot Corner. Put some more money in your pocket. We actually got through this show a little bit quicker than I thought we would. But Dalton's Hot Corner, what do you have for us, bud?
Yeah, so I've got a futures bet tonight, and I touched on it a little bit earlier.
Yay.
I talk a lot in this segment of the show about finding opportunities to buy low and sell high, and to do the opposite of what the Padres do with their player personnel.
Yeah.
The Atlanta Braves are finally where we want them. When we had this conversation 9 days ago, the Atlanta Braves were still minus 150 to win the American League East. And I told you, hey, let's watch that number move a little bit before we bet it.
Yeah.
The Atlanta Braves at FanDuel are now plus 165 to win the NL East, as the Philadelphia Phillies have moved to an absurd minus 220. The Phillies have been awesome, but they ain't played nobody. Right? They just they've been awesome, but they haven't played a team who came into the series with a winning record since the opening series of the season when they played the Atlanta Braves, who I guess also entered that season 0-0, or that series 0-0.
Yeah.
So the Phillies have been awesome, but the Braves are only 5.5, I think it is, games back.
Yeah, they're 5.5.
The Braves, in my opinion, should still be a small favorite to win that division. Baseball is not like football. Like, losing Ronald Acuna Jr. is not like losing Aaron Rodgers. It's also not like losing LeBron James. This is like a single baseball player simply cannot have that large of an impact on a line. I think the Braves are still the better team than the Phillies. I think that will show as the season goes along. So getting them at plus 165, I think, is a great low point to invest in the Braves to win the National League East. I mean, I don't really know how to argue it beyond that, right? I mean, you're talking about getting $1.50 back on a team that I think should win it. So,
well, it's kind of going back to what we were discussing before. I mean, listen, losing Ronald Acuna could be interpreted, I guess, as a big deal, but given the production that he was giving you this year, I mean, that's not hard to replace with something better with that level of production. It just isn't. And it's hard to say because it's a player of the caliber of Acuna, who just won an MVP last year, who just had an unbelievable season last year. It's hard to kind of say that without kind of like stumbling on your words, but it's true. He was hitting 250 at 4 homers. Like, this season was not going well for him, and that's not going to be, I don't think, hard for the Braves to replace, whether it's in-house or whether it's through the trade market with, I don't know, like you said, maybe Jorge Soler, or maybe, Jorge Soler, or I don't know, throw this out there, maybe a Jorge Soler, just throwing stuff to the, seeing if it sticks. But all right, that does it for us. Dalton, any last words before we get on out of here?
I would say go Dodgers, but they don't play again until Friday. And I sure hope we don't have any trouble with the Colorado Rockies this weekend. But no, man, I think it was a fun show. I liked the Negro League baseball talk. Really excited to see those stats get included because I'm excited to read the stories that come from it. So I think that's something worth celebrating. in a week that otherwise was rather somber with one of baseball's best players going down. So
Yeah.
yeah, hey, we're at about the 1/3 mark of the season, and it's a ton of fun.
Things are starting to take shape. I'm telling you, man, we had a lot of stuff to cover today. It took us an hour and 10 minutes to get through that show. Listen, I'm actually kind of proud of that. Like, I really thought that this could have dragged pretty long. I really do.
Yeah, I was worried we were going to be running up against 90 minutes. So
Yeah. No, I think that's pretty good. Okay. As for Dalton Brown, I am Mike Guido. This is the Bicoastal Baseball Podcast on the Grid Network, the only exclusive baseball podcast on the Grid Network every Monday. I know today's Wednesday, but whatever, stuff happens. So we had a great Memorial Day, by the way. That was our excuse. But we were too, fat on burgers and drunk on beer. That's what we.
And I adopted a dog this weekend. So that was
Oh,
awesome.
yes, you did. And you didn't send me the goddamn landscape picture so I could throw it up on the damn stream.
We got a whole bunch more shows. We can share it some other time. And let's be honest, the people don't care that much about me adopted a dog, right?
I very highly disagree. I would argue that that's maybe what they care about the most out of everything that we say. So, but again, as for us, every Monday, 8:00 Eastern time on the Grid Network, on YouTube, on Twitter, you can find us pretty much anywhere. We will see you next week.